Welcome to the Scrum Sessions podcast here in Dallas. I am Q, and that's your clue, man. Go ahead.
Thanks for making it so subtle. Hi everyone, my name is Gurion, and I'm coming to you from Berlin. And Q, what is it you want to talk about today? You were just complaining about your favorite metric.
Yeah, I want to talk about metrics today, and we can start the discussion with my pet peeve. And you know I have over 500 of them, which makes good podcast topics. We already talked about several of them, the coaches and all that stuff. But I start with my biggest pet peeve, and then let's go deeper into metrics overall, which is velocity, which is misused, misunderstood, and weaponized all the time. So let's start with velocity.
All right. Okay. So what's your problem with it? Because actually I like velocity quite a bit.
Well, my problem with that is not that you like it, my problem is everybody misuses it, right? So I seen leadership setting targets for velocity. I see people saying, well, you know what? We did 10 things last sprint. We have to do at least 10 on this, and maybe you should be doing 12, right? And all those things are actually wishful thinking, right? Because there are things that impact velocity. There's people going on vacation, holidays, and etc. And there is this very dangerous assumption that velocity should always be going up, which is unrealistic, right? Because it goes up and down like stocks is a matter of tracking the trends. So my pet peeve is the misusage of velocity.
Okay, so your problem is not actually with velocity per se, but how people misuse it. I can get behind that, but should we be focusing more on stopping people from misusing it then?
Yes, we should, but the problem is velocity is just one of the metrics that's misused. Metrics are misused. You see, the way I see metrics exist to start a conversation. Yeah. Hey, did you see the numbers? What do they tell you? Right? And not to set targets. Every time you set a target for a metric, it instantly becomes a bad measure. Right? So we go back a few years. Oh, we have too many bugs. So let's incentivize people to find bugs. The more bugs they find, the better, right? What is that going to create?
Shit. I was just totally in my mind when you said that, because I used to work at a customer and they actually tracked how many times the phone rang before you picked it up. And you can imagine what kind of chaos that created, because everybody suddenly was focused on picking up the telephone as quickly as possible instead of doing their job. So I got totally lost in my head.
I know, that's exactly my point, is the misusage of metrics, right?
Yeah.
So we just came from the Scrum sessions and we're talking about Monte Carlo simulation, right? Which is one of my favorite things, and maybe we'll do a podcast on that. But if you're interested, look Monte Carlo simulation on the web. It's a great way to forecast stuff, and it's a very good thing. But another problem with metrics overall is, are we looking at one metric only? Because I had a client once, I kid you not, I wish I could tell you who they are, but of course I can't. They had 79 metrics on their dashboard.
Yeah.
So what we created with that? Well, I saw some VP once told me, said, hey, if it's not green, I pay attention. If it's green, I don't care. I said, well, everything is green, so what that tells you? Everything is great. I said, no, it's not. I mean, just because it's green doesn't mean that's great. Right? The same client, they have this thing called commitment reliability metric.
It already sounds ominous. It already sounds bad.
No, you have no idea. So this is what the genius is created, right? Genius is air quotes. If a team said we're going to do 20 things this sprint, it has to be, at the end of the sprint, has to be between minus 10% or plus 10%. Or else you get in trouble. You're going to whip your back, right? So it was a punitive metric. So at the time, they had over 100 teams on the campus, and I was there for about a month, and I heard this stuff. I had the same reaction that you did. Oh, my God, right? And then I start noticing that not a single team on the campus ever got out of the minus or plus 10%. Well, let's face it. There is some magic involved in there, right? Either these guys are geniuses on forecasting stuff. In that case, they should be managing my stock portfolio, right, and all my investments, or there is something funky going on. And it took a while to figure out until one of the Scrum Masters once told me, Q, we figured out that they run the batch job that calculates this stuff 3 days after the end of the sprint. So we go into our tool, right? And we just fudge the numbers. See where my pet peeves with metrics are going with this? One, they were punitive, which is a no-no. Second is they're looking only at one thing. And then they had those 79 things that they only look if it was green. So there's a lot of mistakes in there. First of all is the punitive part. There's no question about this. Yeah. The second one is you never go after an index in isolation. Then if you want to talk velocity, right, so you go there and say, hey, listen, everybody is going up on velocity. Great, we keep growing velocity. We're really good at this, okay? Then you look, for instance, value delivered. Well, honestly, our value delivery is not that great, We don't deliver a lot of value. So what tells you? Well, people are picking up the low-hanging fruits, right? The stuff that's easy to do, so they accrue points for velocity. And then you get a team that's actually going up on the velocity and going up on the value, and then you look, well, people are quitting like crazy, man. They want to get out of the team. And so those are the things that drive me bonkers about metrics, is the misusage. It's not having the conversations. It's setting targets that are actually detractive from everything else. And overall not having a clue that you have to look at several indexes to have a correct picture of that.
Yeah, and actually, I think you make good points there. And this is why I'm not the biggest fan of metrics, right? I think they're important. And for example, I really do like velocity, but I totally agree. It's just a starting point for a conversation. And also, you have to make sure that you see the whole system with whatever metrics you choose, right? And you can choose way too many, you can choose way too little. You can set the boundaries, or for example, where something turns from green to yellow in a really arbitrary or even a political way, so that it doesn't make any sense anymore, or you're achieving your political goals, but the metrics aren't telling you anything anymore. But I'm also noticing something, and I'm not even sure if I can put it into words. It's like there's a certain kind of manager that like really overemphasizes KPIs, right? And immediately if I hear just the term KPIs, immediately the hair on my neck stands up, because well, what does it even mean, right? So yes, I understand that you want to measure some metrics, cool, and everybody wants that. That's the slightest bit analytic. And there's always, of course, like the agile metrics, right? Such as velocity or such as lead time, right? Stuff that is very specific to agile. But then there are, of course, operational KPIs, operational metrics that are specific to the business. And what's really throwing me off often is that people like either want to make a connection between them, or even before they start an agile transformation, they want to have a commitment to, okay, so if we do agile, then we're expecting our operational metrics to go up by these percentage points, right? And you're there and you're like, well, actually, I don't know you guys. I don't know how well you're going to do the transformation. You're asking me to commit to an outcome ahead of time without me even knowing anything about how it's going to work, how much resistance there's going to be. And I think, like, I mean, if we're honest, aren't metrics almost always abused and misused?
Oh, because they are, but it's important to have them, right?
Sure.
You cannot afford not to track things, like we talked in the sessions just a few minutes ago about process efficiency, right? But that is an indicator that, hey, our process efficiency is, I don't know, it's 4%, really low, right? Hey, we have to have a conversation. What is wrong that our process efficiency is 4%? What we need to change about it? Not going there and say, hey, we have to move from 4% to 80% and set a goal, right? Set a target. No, we have to understand is why it's so low, and then we can start working on that. So another thing that I find really bad in metrics is, I'll give you an example. You have a fridge in your house, right? I'm quite sure you have. So when you go open your fridge and you're going to get food out of your fridge, you look at the expiration date, don't you?
I sometimes, yeah.
Well, I hope so, because if you don't, you're going to end up sick really quick, right? Because stuff spoils. Now, metrics need an expiration date too, right? For instance, you have a problem, let's say it takes too long to answer the phone, right? So you can, for instance, say, hey, for the next month, we have to figure out what you're going to do to make the answering time for the phone better, right? And you measure that over a month. And then you say, hey, it got a lot better. Okay, you know what? Forget this metric. Let's go look at something else that needs improvement. So that's what I call shelf life. Now, if you keep tracking the time that takes people to answer the phone between now and 5 years from now, like you mentioned, nobody pays attention to the rest of the stuff.
Then,
right? So like food in your fridge, right? What's the expiration date for the metric? Because the idea of having metrics is to influence behavior. And once you achieve a certain behavior, move on and go influence another behavior.
Yeah. I like where you're going with this, and I think so far we are in complete agreement. So we think that metrics are important. We think that you shouldn't just take one. We think you shouldn't take too many, right? If you have 500, they become meaningless. We think they should be a starting point for a conversation. But I really do wonder, and this is what in the end has turned me kind of off of metrics. I have a business background, so of course I like metrics. I like to look at the numbers. However, I find that so many managers just completely abuse them. Like, first of all, they don't understand them, even though they are metrics, and they abuse them so much that it has completely turned me off, because it seems to be more of like a coaching problem, right? The problem is not the metrics. The problem is how people deal with them, especially in non-agile organizations, in traditional organizations, because they're just a weapon to be used against political enemies. They're just something that you justify your results with, right? It seems like they're almost completely political when they could be so much more.
Well, this reminds me the megapixel wars of the cell phones, right? Because this one has 200 megapixel cameras, the big thing that came up this year. Okay, does that make the picture much better or not, right? Or you're just doing what we call a vanity metric, right? Another problem that is often said in metrics is it's a vanity metric, right? You're just boasting numbers. For instance, if you look at classical product management, we have what we call the innovation accounting, aka pirate metrics, right? So you have acquisition, awareness, and activation, right? Those are the first three in the pirate metrics. Now, if you look at that, let's say you just came up with a new product and you say, I had 3 million sign-ups for our product, so people want to hear about it. Great, right? Have 3 million things. Now, 6 months later, how many people who actually sign up to know about your product actually activated? How many people actually bought it? Right? And it's the same thing with anything in life. So let's say you are in the IT department and you say, hey, you know what? My lead time to value, my cycle time, whatever you want to call it, it's now 5 days. It used to be a month. Great. Did you notice how many bugs come out every time you release something? So you are boasting about something, but there is an structural problem elsewhere that you're not looking at.
Yeah.
One of the things I always tell people, especially in IT environments, is like, you guys have to start thinking as product managers, right? Because in product management, we have this thing called the North Star, the primary metric. Now, many times I've seen the North Star being misused because during the product cycle, the North Star changes, right? Product is brand new. How many people are talking about it? After a while, how many people are buying it, right? And after that, I mean, a couple of years, it's like how many people are upgrading to the new version, right? And then how many people are still using it because if there isn't a lot, we have to kill it, right? And move on. And it's the same thing. So if I'm boasting that my cycle time got so much shorter and my quality sucks, right? And again, connect the dots. You cannot look at metrics in isolation. So you can have a primary metric, a North Star, which has it's fundamental to know, hey, where we're going with something, but you cannot go into vanity mode.
Yeah.
Hey, I have these big numbers, right?
Yeah, and so maybe in another episode we can get into more specific metrics on the product owner side or the delivery side, but I think we're getting close to something. And I apologize for my negativity, right? Because you can sense my frustration with metrics, but I think you're making a very good point that like whatever metrics you're tracking, they have to be balanced in a way, right? You can't just look at one part of the equation that leave everything else out. There has to be some balance. There have to be a couple of different lenses that make sense when taking in total, right? You can't just say, oh, we'll focus on this, but leave everything out. There has to be some balance in it.
Yeah, exactly. And I always repeat this, do not miss the point is to start a conversation. The reason that we measure things is to start a conversation, which goes back to my point. And I said, well, if everything is green, I don't need to do anything about it. Well, just because things are good, it doesn't mean that they're going to stay that way. Quite the opposite.
Yeah.
Right? It happens. Things are going to start failing or you are not improving them. So often one of the things that's another one of my 500 plus pet peeves is people say, well, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Right? If ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, that's a really, I'm going to be very blunt, that's a really dumb way of thinking. Because, hey, when we were living caves, why are we going to move elsewhere, right? The cave is nice. It's a bit humid sometimes, and sometimes a bear comes in and kills one of those. But for the most part, it's a great thing. Why am I going to build an artificial cave elsewhere, right? Why are we going to get a bunch of people together and call it a city, a village, or whatever, right? So we would never evolve if we had this kind of mentality.
Yeah. And, part of my frustration comes also from the fact that if you manage to use metrics well, they can be such a superpower, right? Mm-hmm. If you get the transparency, if you get the analytics. So, for example, it's one of my customers, a team has built this really nice interactive dashboard where they can see, okay, so which customers are using the product, how, right? They can really analyze everything. And, they can say, okay, somebody has bought this, but they're not really using it. So, your salesperson, can you reach out to them and see what's hindering them, right? And so you immediately then get the feedback about some problems, or you can get the follow-up with a customer to see, is everything working all right? And so this really becomes a superpower, right? Because you create more feedback loops, which then feed back into your Scrum process and which makes you accelerate even further. And it's just so frustrating to see what's actually possible if you respect those kind of, those several points that we've been talking about. Because then you create a superpower. You can just accelerate your system by so much because you have the right information at the right moment and can make good decisions based on that. While so many people just waste this opportunity by playing political games, by misusing them, by not knowing how to use them, and it's such a waste in the end.
Yeah, and you see, I agree with you being negative sometimes and frustrated because it's this misusage, right? And the other one is sometimes we actually don't necessarily misuse them, but we don't implement them correctly, right? A few months ago, I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said, Q, I don't like OKRs, objectives and key results, right? I said, why not? Well, because it only works if people implement them properly. And I said, well, that is true of everything, including Scrum, including Lean, including Kanban, including of anything. anything that's not implemented properly, it's going to have a negative result, right? So I see people sometimes complain about Scrum, some people complain about this, some people complain about metrics. But the point of the matter is you have to understand if something is fit for purpose. You have to be careful not to set targets because then everybody ignores everything else. And you have to think about the shelf life of that. How long are you going to measure that? Right? Because again, it's about having the conversation. What can we do to improve something? And that changes from time to time. And not pretend that, hey, everything is great, we don't need to change anything. Right? Then there's no innovation. I think one of the things that is very dangerous with metrics is we go into process improvement mode. Hey, Hugh, you're saying you don't like process improvement. I said, no. The thing I saw in many industries and clients I had in the past is they get so into improving what they have, and they forget to inject innovation into the process. So we have to be very careful that, again, we don't get into a vanity metric and say, hey, our cycle time now is a day, and it used to be 3 months 5 years ago. Yeah, but are you innovating that process? No, we 1 day is the maximum we can do. Yes, with this process right now. What about if you disrupt that, you try something completely different, something more radical, right? So innovation, it's key to improvement. Improvement is not about making the number smaller or bigger, whatever the situation may be. It's about using innovation to shake things down, to get things a bit out of the status quo, and then use the numbers to prove that to be true or not.
Yeah. So this really sounds like target fixation, this concept. I think it was in the Second World War, where fighter pilots would just ram into buildings that they were trying to shoot at from the sky because they were so fixated on the target that they forgot to disconnect and just crashed into the target that they were trying to hit. Yeah, very stupid idea. And I can really see how you can get into that.
Yeah, and it's very easy to get into that.
Yeah, awesome.
So I think that's it for metrics. We should come with another topic next month. Maybe we talk more about the product management side of metrics. But since you always complain, you close the podcast today, my friend.
Thanks for putting me on the spot again. So thank you everybody for listening. We hope this has been valuable to you to talk a little bit about the metrics, about the frustration that can come if you misuse them. You gave us a couple of really good pointers of how to do it properly, like balance them out and so on. And yeah, maybe in one of the following podcasts, we can dive down a little bit deeper on specific metrics that we think are helpful in an agile context and that can help you create better awareness and information in your team, in your organization. So this is me, Gary from Berlin, signing off.
Here's Q from Dallas, signing off. See you guys soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.